I came home. I found a note. Mike, I've left for another man. Sorry, Helen. That evening, as I crossed the threshold of my abode, an uncanny stillness enveloped me. The familiar echoes of my wife Helen and our children were conspicuously absent. Navigating the silent corridors, my gaze fell upon a letter perched atop the kitchen table. Mike, I'm sorry I lack the courage to face you directly. I've met another man and fallen in love. The children are with me and unharmed. The divorce documents are in the envelope beneath this letter. As you'll notice, I'm not requesting anything. Helen. In that ephemeral moment, my world imploded. I, Mike Lewis, had shared 11 years of matrimony with Helen, and now she was abandoning me without so much as a conversation. Seething with rage, I stormed through the kitchen, muttering curses under my breath. I tore open the envelope and skimmed the divorce papers. She was relinquishing the house and all our finances to me, taking only her garments and the children's belongings. But the final stipulation ignited my fury. She desired me to sign documents permitting her new paramour to adopt our progeny, as if that would ever transpire. At least I discerned whom she had left me for, Henry Castlake. Grasping my phone, I dialed her number. Hello, Mike, she answered cautiously. Spare me the pleasantries. What in the world is happening, Helen? I barked. As I mentioned in my note, I've met someone else and have fallen for him, she responded with unsettling composure. Right, because people spontaneously abandon marriages and entangle themselves with someone new. So you've been engaged in an affair? I sincerely hope it wasn't in our own bed. Please refrain from cursing and try to remain civil, Helen implored. Civil? To hell with civility. You're a betrayer. You can have your divorce and stay with that scoundrel, but I won't surrender my children for adoption. Inform Mr. Big Shot he can go straight to perdition, I shouted before slamming the phone down. Seeking to purge my fury, I indulged in a long, scalding shower, then changed attire and ventured out to procure a meal. Cooking was inconceivable in my current state. The food was tolerable, and afterward, I decided to visit a tavern for a few libations. Given the day's turmoil, I reckoned I deserved it. At the pub, I encountered my friend Paul. Mike, it's rare to see you here. Did you manage to escape the family for the evening? He asked with a grin. Something like that, I sighed. I returned home to an empty house and a packet of divorce papers. Helen is leaving me. Good grief, I didn't anticipate that, Paul said, eyes widening. Nor did I. She's moved in with Henry Castlake. You mean the Castlake of Castlake Construction? Precisely, since she's enamored with him. What are your plans? Paul inquired. I'll grant her the divorce. She doesn't want anything from me, so I'll sign the papers and be done with it. There was another document she wanted me to sign, but I already discarded it. What document? Paul pressed. She wants me to allow that man to adopt my children. That's categorically out of the question. Paul shook his head in disgust. One thing's certain, Castlake can kiss my backside. I was slated to start working for him on Monday. Forget that. I'll find employment elsewhere. I nodded in agreement. I signed the divorce papers, but the adoption form went straight into the trash where it belonged. Helen attempted to persuade me, but I remained unmoved. Eventually, she conceded. At the time of the separation, Chloe was 10 and Lee was 8. I yearned for retribution against Castlake, but I wasn't about to do anything that would land me behind bars. Part of my vindication unfolded without any action on my part. Word spread about what transpired, and most local contractors refused to collaborate with Castlake Construction. Recognizing his betrayal towards me, they retaliated by declining his projects. Of course, Henry secured other contractors, but they were unreliable and the workmanship suffered. On several occasions, I was solicited to provide quotes for jobs, but upon learning they were for Castlake, I abstained entirely. 6 months elapsed, and the divorce was finalized. 3 months thereafter, Helen and Henry wed. I took the children for a week while they embarked on their honeymoon. I didn't do it to assist them. I simply figured a week was preferable to the sporadic weekends I was allotted. What truly incensed me was a query from my daughter, Chloe. Dad, why did you send us to live with Mom and Henry? She asked innocently. What? I didn't send you anywhere. Your mother took you because she doesn't love me anymore. If it were my choice, you'd have stayed here. I assured her, clarifying that it wasn't my decision. I resolved to have a stern conversation with Helen about this deception. When Helen arrived to collect the children, she entered with a smile, but her expression soured when I confronted her. Cease your fabrications and nonsensical talk, Helen. Henceforth, tell the children the truth. If you don't, I will. They now understand that I never asked you to take them. If I could, I'd fight for custody immediately. Helen departed in anger. Life as a solitary man felt alien after years of marriage. Some friends endeavored to set me up on dates, but frankly, I wasn't inclined to meet anyone new. I craved companionship, but not the complexities of dating. Little did I anticipate, my life was poised to transform once more. My neighbors were Gary and Emily. They had moved in shortly after Helen left me. Their residence was a bargain due to its need for extensive repairs. Emily was a secretary, and Gary had recently exited the army. We got along amicably, and they appeared to be a pleasant couple. When our paths crossed, we'd engage in casual conversation. Then calamity struck. One day, Gary collapsed at work. Paramedics and a physician arrived within minutes, but Gary was declared deceased at the scene. The autopsy revealed a subdural hematoma as the cause. Emily was shattered and utterly alone. I offered her my friendship and support. With Gary's parents deceased and Emily's parents vacationing in Europe, she had no immediate family nearby. Unwilling to leave her isolated, I invited her into my home and poured us both a drink. She wept and spoke of her uncertain future, eventually succumbing to exhaustion and falling asleep on my couch. I dragged a blanket over her and settled into the armchair, ready to assist if she awoke during the night. The following morning, Emily was departing just as Helen arrived to drop off the kids. "Nice to see you're not wasting any time, Mike," Helen sneered. "Cut it out, Helen. The poor woman just lost her husband," I retorted. Helen glanced at me skeptically, then turned her attention to the children. Later that day, I explained to Chloe and Lee why Emily had been at the house. Chloe appeared somber, and I suspected Lee didn't fully grasp the situation. Emily requested that I attend Gary's funeral, which I obliged. In our country, mortgage loans are mandated to be insured, so fortunately, Emily wouldn't be left destitute, a small solace amidst her grief. Emily's parents returned from Europe, and they both spoke with me after the service. I assured them I would look after Emily. Besides her co-workers, I was her sole confidant. I offered Emily assistance with minor tasks, nothing significant, just efforts to keep her home habitable. The next time Helen dropped off the kids, she remained in her car, which suited me fine, sparing me an unwanted conversation. Emily and I spent considerable time together, not romantically, but as friends offering mutual support. Nearly a year later, Lee was playing in the yard while I tinkered with my van. Hearing voices, I turned to see him conversing with Emily. I called out, asking him not to bother her, but Emily dismissed my concern. "It's all right. He's keeping me company while I hang the laundry," she said. "Emily, would you like to have dinner with us tonight?" Lee blurted out. "Lee, you can't just invite people over without asking," I gently admonished. "She's not just people, she's Emily," he declared. We both chuckled. Turning to Emily, I asked, "Would you care to join us for dinner?" "Yes, I'd be delighted. Thank you," she replied warmly. Lee dashed off to inform Chloe of our guest. I apologized for his forwardness, but Emily was unbothered. She assisted me in preparing the meal, demonstrating notable culinary skills. Afterward, she helped tidy up and lingered with us before returning home. "Thank you for the lovely dinner, Mike. I truly enjoyed it," she said at the door. "Thank you for accepting the invitation," I responded. She embraced me briefly, and I watched as she walked to her house, hearing the click of her door locking behind her. "She's really nice, Dad. Is Emily your girlfriend?" Chloe asked with a mischievous grin. "No, Emily is just a friend and neighbor," I replied, though I couldn't help but think it wouldn't be undesirable if she were more. I kept that sentiment to myself. On Sunday afternoon, Helen collected the kids. I anticipated they'd mention Emily joining us for dinner, and I wasn't mistaken. The next time Helen came to pick them up, she paid particular attention and inquired about Emily. "Not that it's any of your concern, but Emily is simply a friend," I stated. "Besides, you left me for that man, so why do you care about my affairs?" "I don't care, Mike. I was merely asking," she retorted. "Sure. You obtained what you wanted. My life is no longer your business." "I didn't get everything I wanted," she mumbled. "No, you didn't. And if you're referring to me allowing that man to adopt the kids, forget it. That's never happening, so accept it." "I was just thinking." "No, Helen, you weren't thinking. You left me for a lavish life with him. If he desires children, he can father his own. That man took my wife and shattered my marriage, and there's no chance he'll ever adopt my children. Ever." Helen pouted and departed. I smiled, satisfied that I'd unsettled her. A year later, I hadn't seen much of Emily for several weeks, partly due to my hectic schedule. My friend Paul was rewiring a house for a young couple and requested that I provide a quote for a complete plumbing overhaul. My proposal was accepted, and I had a few frenzied weeks ahead to complete the work. While collaborating on the house, Paul kept me apprised of local happenings. Castlake still depended on out-of-town specialists, as most local tradesmen continued to avoid working for him. Upon completing the project, I found myself with some leisure time. I decided to invite Emily to dinner. She agreed, and we arranged to meet on Saturday evening. When I went to collect her, I was taken aback. Petite as she was, Emily had a new hairstyle that framed her face exquisitely. The dress she wore accentuated her slender figure, and for the first time, I felt a profound attraction to her. Dinner was splendid, and we engaged in deep conversations about our lives. Later that night, as I escorted Emily to her door, she said softly, "Thank you for a wonderful evening, Mike." I smiled, and before I could respond, Emily stood on her tiptoes and kissed me, not a mere peck, but a full, passionate kiss. "Well, I didn't foresee that," I murmured, slightly breathless. "Take me out again, and let's see where it leads." Emily smiled, bidding me good night with a gentle kiss on the cheek. I invited Emily out once more, and this time we ended up in my bed. She may have been diminutive, but she was a force of nature. I don't think I'd ever experienced such fulfilling intimacy. Emily and I began spending increasingly more time together, and eventually she sold her house and moved in with me. The kids were thrilled that I was dating, and I knew they'd relay everything to Helen. According to Chloe, their mother was not pleased. Well, she didn't want me, but Emily did. A year after we first became intimate, Emily and I married. When the kids informed Helen, she merely scoffed and turned away. Emily and I had 2 children. We named our first son Gary and his younger brother Robert. My older children were now old enough to drive themselves over, which meant even less interaction with Helen. Years rolled by, and one evening Chloe announced she was getting married. Her boyfriend Josh had proposed the night before. As her father, I inquired if they needed assistance with the wedding expenses. "We thought we wouldn't, but now we do," she said hesitantly. I looked puzzled until Chloe elaborated. Henry said he'd cover the wedding costs. We were discussing plans with him and Mom, and then he dropped a bombshell. Henry would fund the wedding only if he got to walk me down the aisle. I told him absolutely not. That's your role. Henry then said that if that's the case, he won't contribute financially. Chloe was visibly upset. I, on the other hand, was seething at Castlake's audacity. Emily suggested we speak privately, so we stepped into the garden. "Mike, we still have funds from the sale of my house. Please use it to cover the wedding expenses. Chloe deserves a beautiful day," Emily urged. "I know, but that's your money. I can't ask you to spend it on Chloe," I protested. "Yes, you can. Now go and tell her we'll handle all the costs." Chloe was elated when I conveyed the news. We agreed on a budget, and everything they desired fit within it. The next day, Chloe called to inform me that Henry was furious, and apparently, Helen wasn't too pleased either. One afternoon, while we were relaxing in the garden, Lee arrived unexpectedly. He said he'd left because he was tired of his mother and Henry's incessant arguing. "Are they still quarreling about the wedding?" Emily asked. "No, it's something else. From what I gather, Henry isn't, fulfilling his duties in the bedroom," Lee said with a smirk. I couldn't help but laugh. It was satisfying to know that Helen had left me for someone who couldn't meet her needs. "The walls in the house are pretty thin, Dad. I can hear them at night. I think Mom is fed up with Henry's, shortcomings," Lee added. We'd shared a hearty laugh over the situation while sipping our beers. Lee decided to stay the night to avoid the tension at home. On Chloe and Josh's wedding day, Helen was visibly discontented. Chloe had informed her that she and Henry would be seated behind Emily and me. The ceremony proceeded smoothly. I agreed to let Helen sit at the head table during the reception, but Henry was seated with Emily, Robert, Gary, and Lee. After the speeches concluded, a few tables were cleared for dancing. Josh and Chloe shared their first dance, followed by Emily and me and Helen and Henry. Later in the evening, as we stood by the bar, Gary and Robert were chatting with one of the bridesmaids and her children. Lee asked Emily to dance, and I encouraged them. Helen seized the moment to approach me. It was apparent she'd been drinking, and I anticipated trouble. "Look at them together. She looks young enough to be Lee's date," she scoffed. Despite being a mother of 2, Emily still appeared as youthful as when I first met her. Helen, conversely, hadn't aged gracefully and had gained weight. Her dress exposed a low-cut back, revealing unflattering folds. Henry was balding and overweight, a fitting pair. "Don't start, Helen. Envy doesn't suit you. Besides, we're divorced. You have no say in my life. Envious? Of her? Please, she looks like she should still be in school. Maybe she'll be worthwhile once she fills out and develops a decent figure, Helen sneered. Do not disparage my wife. For your information, Emily is more of a woman than you ever were, I retorted. Helen stared at me, stunned. Ask yourself, Helen, when was the last time you had satisfying intimacy, or any at all? I paused. Well, I enjoyed incredible intimacy last night, and I might have even better tonight. Helen stood there speechless as Henry joined us. You see, Helen, when you left me, you thought you were upgrading. Perhaps you were, perhaps not. As for me, I've moved on. I have a wife who loves me genuinely, 2 wonderful children in addition to the 2 I already had. Life is as fulfilling as it could be for me. Can you say the same? I walked away, leaving them both standing there like statues. Emily and I swayed to the slow music, while Lee was pulled onto the dance floor by a bridesmaid. What was that about at the bar? Emily whispered as we danced. Kiss me, and I'll tell you later, I replied. We kissed, and I knew Helen was watching. When we parted, I smiled in her direction. She turned away, ordering another drink. Yes, I had indeed moved on. Reflecting on what I had then versus now, I'd say I made an excellent trade. Thank you for reading. Cherish yourself and those you hold dear.